Well, hello, welcome.
Hi,
How are you? Uh,
I'm
n-
really good.
Good, good. Now, you look very familiar to me, so I know we've met, but I have a very poor memory. So, your name is Mary Jane. We know that. And so, here's our first clue: money launderer. It sounds like a gangster story. Number two, Fitzgerald's version of Caddy Compson. That's a little tricky. And then number three, Exit Pursued by a Bear, which is a famous stage direction from Shakespeare's Winter Tale, I think it is. So, if anybody out there would like to guess where we might be beaming into, I personally am absolutely stumped. So, I'm going to ask Mary Jane to introduce herself and tell us where we're at.
Hi, I'm Mary Jane Leving, and I'm here on the shore of Matoscabi Day, otherwise known as White Bear Lake, Minnesota.
Wonderful. That's a very important location. Fitzgerald spent a lot of time as a young adult there, and also spent a big chunk of 1922 there working. And there's a couple stories that he actually references White Bear to, but he called it Black Bear. The most famous of them is Winter Dreams. So, and Mary Jane, you helped organize a fabulous day back about 4 years ago where we got to spend on the lake and really get introduced to the history of that particular area. And I know you've are a Minnesota historian as well, and we're working on a article that you'll have in the next Fitzgerald review. So we're very excited about that. But let me ask you this: when you first moved to White Bear Lake, did you know any of the Fitzgerald history there?
You know, that's a great question. I knew the Fitzgerald history in St. Paul. I grew up not far from his haunts, a little bit west of there in St. Paul, and my dad had a Model T Ford. So, kind of Fitzgerald tours and just different tours of the history of St. Paul. Also, gangsters that you mentioned, which are very part and parcel of St. Paul's history. So, I was aware of that, but it wasn't until I came to White Bear in my 20s and started to live out here that I was interested. I always think that when you know something about where you are, then you can enjoy that community more fully. And that's really what our being able to host the Fitzgerald conference for the White Bear Lake Day really meant to the community. Any reason for a party has always been, if it's worth doing, it's worth overdoing if it's entertaining on White Bear. So,
Tell
yes.
us a little bit historically about White Bear Lake and what it represents, and in particular, what it would have represented when Fitzgerald was growing up and then when he went back there in 1922.
So White Bear Lake is a suburban lake that was on the streetcar line and also on the railroad. So it was a kind of a resort community for St. Paul for many years, going back to actually the 1850s, which is very old here. People would come up from the south to escape the various epidemics and come to take the health-giving waters of White Bear. So White Bear is a storied place in many ways, and Fitzgerald expanded on that and has become a part of that legend. But it really is built on a number of stories long term. Mark Twain wrote about White Bear Lake in Life on the Mississippi. And you know, early guidebooks that you could use to get your little red guidebook. I have a copy of it, Appleton's guidebook with all the maps in it, and that has the White Bear Lake story. So that was sort of the origin of a legend of White Bear. But the Dakota actually named the lake, so we know that it was called Mato Bay, which is now Manamidi is part of the lake over here. And that's one of four different communities that ring White Bear Lake in two counties. So it's a sizable lake.
Okay, great, great. That's wonderful.
Yeah, Fitzgerald then this was, he would come out here in the summer and he would visit his aunt, McQuillan, had a house in Bald Eagle, which is another lake, not too, just a little ways away. And he would visit there. He visited also Cecil Reed, um, or Cecil, I don't know how you say that, but Reed, at his home in Delwood. And then I think most importantly was White Bear Lake was the scene of one of his really grand successes, which was the play that he wrote and produced and organized, just as he went off to Princeton, which was given at the White Bear Yacht Club. So I always think of him living there then with from 1922, and they came to White Bear Lake about the time. There's a notice in the local paper, Ripples around the Lake, it's called, and it says Mr. and Mrs. F. Scott Fitzgerald have moved to the yacht club. So that's just before the solstice. So we know that they kind of inhabited the White Bear Yacht Club within that same parameter that the framework of the Great Gatsby exists in.
And in fact, when we were on the boat and you were taking us around, you pointed out that your neighbor has a marvelous, very beautiful boathouse and that it could possibly have some connection to Gatsby.
So the boathouse, which is phenomenal, was built in 1915, and it's a real landmark on the lake. And you can see it directly across over my shoulder. Here is where the yacht club was in the distance. So there's a red and a green light there. That's always been a red and a green light. And I didn't even know it. I lived here for years and was already deep into the Fitzgerald interest. And I think the people found the switch. The switch was up in the house, and suddenly one 4th of July, the light came on. I was like, wow, that's something else. So I think that's part of the charm of White Bear, is that there are things, time moves slowly here.
That's great. That's great. Now, I know that you were recently working with a guy from Golfer's Journal who was doing an article on winter dreams, which is, I think we're so used to thinking of that story and its connection to the Great Gatsby that we forget that it's a sports story and that it's a golfer story. So I know when Tom contacted me and was talking about going and playing the course there and his interest in this story, I almost was a little embarrassed. But I'm wondering there in terms of the golf course and the golf lore, does that story resonate with golfers? I mean, what's the sort of feel of that story there amongst the yacht club folks?
Well, I think that scene in Winter Dreams, when he's skiing across the golf course in winter, is very present for. And I'm not a golfer, but the idea of going out with the colored balls really early. There's that golf course was designed by a famous golf architect, which a local historian has done quite a bit. And he spoke at he was one of the featured uh, people at the yacht club there too. I think sometimes that when you have somebody who is so prominent, like Fitzgerald is, and it crosses both academia as well as kind of the collective image of America in such a profound way that it's hard to kind of, there, maybe even locally you minimize it a little bit. When I first got out here, there were still the elders who were part of Fitzgerald's generation that would have
Oh,
known him.
okay.
So that was in the 80s. And I really wanted to mention too that that I took a class at the local community college by somebody who was now the late Lloyd Hackle,
Hmm.
and he was such a great popular historian. He both had rigor, so he really required that if you were going to say something about it, then you needed to bring something important to the conversation. But he made Fitzgerald interesting and accessible to a whole generation of people, including me. And things like the having the Fitzgerald Conference here then sparks a whole other group of people, and I think that's really wonderful. I was noticing I was really enjoying in the Fitzgerald Journal that you had the piece by, is it Ms. Howe, who
Mm-hmm.
teaches
Yep.
Gatsby, and what a great piece that was, and how interesting. And I think that that's really, there's a whole community that kind of brings it out here in some way, and that's we're glad he spent some time here. It's made
Yeah.
it even more interesting.
It adds so much to the I think the color of his Minnesota stories to have that lake environment. And of course there's a lot of sociology there because that story is in many ways about class differences between the caddies and the kind of the club members. I know you're very active in the White Bear Historical Society. Can you give us an idea of what is important in terms of preserving the history to that community there?
Well, I think participation with a national conference like that really energizes, and then when people can enjoy it so much, and we, I here's a little story. I think it's okay. Um, Something was left behind, and they were so diligent in trying to find out whose it was, and I was like, I don't know, it's a million details, but they needed
Mhm.
to get it back, and it turned out to be, I don't remember, one of Fitzgerald's granddaughter
Oh,
or
okay.
great granddaughter. It was, oh, they were thrilled to get it back. So I thought
Oh, that's
that's
neat.
kind of a fun detail. That's a story that gets told here in White Bear. So that's really fun. I think that that's great. Um,
I
what
know they
else? So
loved
I'm sorry.
that day up there. I mean, that you could just tell that
Oh, we
they were
loved,
really
there
thrilled
was
by
so
it.
much joy in it. And I think that, thinking about the format that this is now, and then because of that, we went to Toulouse, which was
Right.
wonderful for a number of us from Minnesota did, and had a really great experience doing that too. So it's, yeah, it's really interesting. It's a vibrant community of scholars. Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
love your point about the popular history kind of connecting. I think the great thing I mean, I'm in Montgomery, so, we have a little local history interest, but it just seems like a great pipeline to go back and forth between the local groups and the national groups. Of course, all the members of national groups are member of local groups as well. So it's
That's
all
right.
one big happy family.
I wanted to just give a plug too for the other very, very fine Fitzgerald White Bear Lake story. I think my favorite actually, which is He Thinks He's Wonderful.
Yes. In fact, we're getting ready to do
Part
that
of
for our
the,
Fitzgerald podcast. So,
oh, I
and
love that story. I find it so interesting. And there's so much white bear sociology in that too.
mhm.
And so, and I guess, kind of the lake life and coming out to White Bear and getting getting dropped off at the Wildwood Amusement Park. And so that one is really, if you're a White Bearophile, then I highly recommend He Thinks He's Wonderful.
All right, so we're going to end just real quick with a couple pictures that Mary Jane is emailing us of how beautiful White Bear Lake is. And if you're ever in that area, we recommend you just go take a day out there. Now, you do have a local historical society that is open to the public. Am I correct?
Yeah, White Bear Lake Area Historical Society. They've got great resources, really knowledgeable. Yeah, it's great. And there's a boating tour of White Bear Lake that they have too, and you can get that. But yeah, and Facebook page and all of that too. So if you're interested in White Bear Lake history, I highly recommend the White Bear Lake Area Historical Society social media stuff. It's really kind of fun.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Mary Jane, and hope to see you at another conference here soon.
Oh, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure talking to you.